So I'm a Californian who transplanted to the Seattle area, and I lived there for about 2 years. After the first 5 minutes of being in Washington State, I got pulled over by a policeman. I was driving a 26-foot U-Haul with my car attached to the back of it, so I was driving in the slow lane the whole way up I-5, and there was a police officer who pulled someone over, and I just drove on past like I normally would. And about 2 minutes later, I got pulled over because I guess in Washington State, you're supposed to either get in the other lane or slow down when there's a police car pulling someone over. I didn't know that, and the cop pulled me over, and he was like, "Well, now you know." Well, let's start out with the good. See, Washington is a really, really beautiful state. There are trees everywhere, and with all the rain, everything is green. There's obviously a good music scene in Seattle, and I never would have met Chris Novoselic or Liam Gallagher if I didn't move there. The weather isn't as rainy and gloomy as people paint it to be. Just don't tell anyone. Well, okay, never mind. I guess it does rain a lot. And it's a good tourist trap town, meaning there are a lot of places to see, like the Space Needle, Pike's Market. Hey look, they're throwing the fish at Pike's Market. Everyone loves that. You gotta visit that at least once. But there are museums. You can go see Kurt Cobain's house. You can go see Jimi Hendrix's grave. There are a lot of animals and wildlife everywhere. Look how cute that one is. There's another shot of some deer I saw on the side of the road. I've seen coyotes. I think you get the idea. Okay, enough with all the positivity. Let's get to some of the bad stuff about living in the Seattle area. The Seattle Freeze. In case you don't know what that is, it's basically Seattle has a reputation of being a cold city, meaning that people who grew up there have a core group of friends and they don't let outsiders in very much. At least that's what they say. And yeah, it's true. I didn't make one friend the whole time I was there because I don't work with other people. That's usually how I make friends. And plus, I just hate people in general, so that I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. Wonder if I'm ever gonna get where I'm going. Traffic. Traffic is the worst I've ever seen, and I grew up in Los Angeles. I've seen more accidents in 2 years in the Seattle area than I saw my whole life anywhere else. I've flipped off more people in the last 2 years than I have my whole life. I even flipped off a city bus driver who cut me off and honked at me. I think when they designed the roads, they didn't expect such a huge population explosion, so there aren't enough turn lanes. And people don't use their blinker. It's almost like they're embarrassed to use their blinker. That's how little they use it. I got a $53 parking ticket for being parked somewhere in downtown for 3 minutes where I actually thought I could park. And he gave me the ticket, and there were homeless people peeing on the street, shooting up, and living in tents within 10 feet of my car. But they choose to pick on me. And speaking of homeless, oh man. Just like all the major cities on the West Coast, Seattle has a huge homeless problem. Look at that bum sleeping right there on the street. I took that video. But it's embarrassing. Because Seattle is such a pretty city. And yet, they allow this garbage to sleep on the streets and leave their trash and their junkies everywhere. It's so bad. It made me not want to go downtown ever. Another bad thing about the weather, it gets dark so early in the wintertime, and I just could never get used to it. I mean, you hardly ever see the sun, and it definitely affects your mood. At least it did mine. I lived in Bellevue, and recently I read an article where it said if you don't make at least $100,000 a year living in Bellevue, you are poor. And now for the ugly part of living in the Seattle area, housing prices. They are out of control because Seattle is home to Amazon, Microsoft, and Boeing. And this forces a lot of people to live on the streets because they can't afford rent. The big thing is for rich people to buy a smaller house and build a huge mansion on it. And I'm gonna sound like I'm jealous and bitter, and yes, I am jealous and bitter. It sucks because there's so much wealth, and driving around some of these towns like Redmond and Bellevue, and oh man, it's just sickening to see how people can live in such huge houses, and 10 miles away there are people, who can't even afford to eat. This is a true life example of how things can be tough up there. Right before I moved, I had a $30 Detolf shelf that I wanted to sell on OfferUp, and I got a few people, message me about it, and then a hooker offered me her services in trade for a $30 shelf. I can't make this stuff up. That's how bad things are for some people up there. And hey, people gotta make a living, but so taking all these things into consideration, I just decided it would be a lot better to move back to California if I ever wanted to get ahead in life. And plus, I missed In-N-Out. Well, I guess that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. And if anyone's offended, don't be. It's just my opinion. I'm sure you have your own opinion, and that's it. Have a good one.